Right, I think we can get started. Good evening. My name is Phil Schomber. I'm the adult programmer here at Hedberg. And I want to thank everyone for coming tonight as we continue our programming for Fake News Month. It's my privilege this evening to be able to introduce Mary Buelow. Mary is the head of our Information Services Department. And she's here tonight to discuss evaluating news sources and the importance of that. You know, today we just have so much information thrown at us, and it comes from so many different places. It's often hard to figure out what we're looking at or what we're listening to. You know, is it a news account? Is it an opinion piece? Or is it something else entirely? And Mary's going to give us some of the tools that we can use to evaluate those sources of information and determine what's true and what isn't. So would you please welcome Mary Buelow.
Thank you, Phil, and good evening, everyone. Before we start, I'd like to do a quick poll. So, who here has fallen for fake news sometime in the last month? Okay, all right, so some people know that they have. Is there anyone who definitely has not fallen for fake news in the last month? Okay, who's not sure? Okay, yeah, if you're not sure, join the club. Everyone has had a situation where they've received news and they don't know whether or not to believe it. After all, one definition of news is information not previously known. And if you didn't know it before, why would you automatically believe it now? At the same time, we need news. Another definition of news is noteworthy information, especially about recent or important events. So way back in the days when we were living in caves and hunting and gathering, and we'd be running around the forest, there would be a guy who'd run up and say, "Shh, hurry, there's a bear over there. Grab your spear." And so if everyone ran and grabbed their spear, they might be able to have some good bear meat for dinner. But if that guy didn't run up and didn't say, "There's a bear over there," one of us might become dinner. So news is important. It's important to find out topical information. So fast forward a few millennia, we are farmers now, we have herds of sheep and cows and whatever. We send the sheep up on the hills, we send one of the village boys up to watch after him. And this boy is bored because sheep don't do anything, they just sit there and eat. So he has to watch them all day. And he decides one day he's going to have a little fun with everybody. And he's going to start calling, "Wolf! Wolf! There's a wolf attacking the sheep!" And all the villagers drop what they're doing, they grab their pitchforks or whatever else they have, they come running up the hill, they find no wolf, they find this boy just rolling on the hill laughing, and they have fallen for fake news. So we know that we need news. We know some of that news can be fake, and we know from the story about the boy who called wolf that repeated fake news can be bad, because after a while they stop believing him, even when the wolf really did come. So if we fast forward a few more millennia to the present day, today we have more news than ever before. And this news is not coming from people we know. It's not coming from the person that we know gives good information who's coming up and saying, "There's a bear." It's not coming from the kid up on the hill who we know just likes to prank. It's coming from strangers. And these strangers say they're experts. They might say they're professional journalists. But we don't know because we've never met these people. And some of these strangers have their own agenda. They're giving us news so we will follow their agenda, even if that is not in our best interests. So it's up to us to decide if each piece of news that comes our way is true or not, and what we want to do with it. And that's hard because we're getting bombarded with this stuff. The strangers are gathering it, they're packaging it, they're marketing it and selling it to us. You know, it could be TV, radio, blogs, websites, Facebook, podcasts, you name it. We can't possibly absorb it all. We have to pick and choose. And when we do that, we're going to pick and choose stuff that we like. Or we're going to let the computers filter it for us, and the computers will filter out the stuff we don't like. And that creates problems, because when we're actively selecting sources that reinforce our worldview, that creates a preference bubble. With a preference bubble, I only get news that describes the world the way I want to see that world. And when we let a computer algorithm select the news for us, based on our previous choices through news feeds and social media, that creates the filter bubble, and the computer will filter out anything I don't like. And when we live in bubbles, those bubbles create an echo chamber. In echo chambers, our own opinions are echoed back to us. When that happens, we're getting information that reinforces our own beliefs, and we're not getting that new information that we previously didn't know. So this evening we're going to explore how we can get the real news we need. We'll look at fake news. We'll look at why it was created. We'll see how news providers try to lead you to specific conditions and specific conclusions, even when they might be telling the truth. They might not, they might be. And we'll also look at how we can bust through our own bubbles so we can get the information we need to know. So, okay, news just came through this last week. El Dorado has been found. After how many hundreds of years, we found El Dorado. Of course, this is from The Onion. And The Onion is a known website. Actually, before it was a website, it was a newspaper that satirized the news. It has lots of fun stuff. It actually was very careful to give us the facts that El Dorado's off of I-95 in Baltimore. And it's just fun to read. It's not real. Though I know there have been teachers, high school teachers and college professors who have seen it show up on bibliographies for research papers. It's not real. It's intended to be satire and to poke fun at things in the news. And one example is another thing that was in last week's news was The Onion has published an anonymous op-ed. It's from two sources close to Trump who think that their dad is the best dad ever. And so that's, of course, a play off the op-ed that appeared in the New York Times. Okay, does anyone remember when Vin Diesel was in town? So this was probably a year and a half ago. He had car trouble. He was just passing through and he had car trouble, and people from Janesville stepped forward and helped him, and they were very generous, and he was so impressed that he's looking at property here in Janesville, and he wants to come back here and live. Well, the Gazette missed it because it didn't happen. This is another fake news. Actually, this was very common for a while. Saw dozens of pieces of these from friends all over the country where a famous person praises local city residents for helping him with a mechanical issue with his car. Fill in the blank, tons of names, tons of towns. The rest of the article was exactly the same. And if I hadn't seen a dozen of them, the first clue is that I'd seen a dozen of them and they all looked exactly the same except for place and name, I would still have some clues that this was fake. So one of the things that if I'm a little curious, concerned that I might not have a reliable source on a website, I'll take a look at the website and I'll look to see if it has an About Us. And this one did not say About Us, but it did say disclaimer. And I'm like, why are they giving a disclaimer? I click on it and it says, this is a satirical and fantasy website. None of the articles here should be considered true and are simply works of satire or fantasy. and are meant for entertainment purposes. So this is another piece of purely fake news. And why on earth would someone do this with city and all these different names and all these different towns? Is they actually make money off of it. So they own the web domain. They sell sales of advertising on the web domain. So in this case, we have an ad for one simple method to remove eye bags and lip lines in seconds. And whether or not anybody actually clicks on that ad, the owner of this website gets money. Because there's one of the ways they charge for ads on the internet is how many people, they call it by eyeballs. So how many eyeballs, how many people click on the page that ad appears, and it's their chance to see that ad. So all these people who are going, oh, Vin Diesel, he was in Janesville. I might not know who Vin Diesel is, but I know he's famous, and he was in Janesville. And then they share it with their friends, and they share it with their parents and their kids, and everyone's all excited for a day or two. And that meant a lot of eyeballs looking at that article, and every time someone opened that page, the owner of the website got a little bit of money. And if they get lots and lots of people clicking on that page, the more clicks they get, they can actually raise their advertising prices. So people want clicks. They want you to click on their webpage. So that is another example, really classic example of fake news is website identity theft. And this was happening a lot with news websites, a little less so now, but it's still happening a lot with financial sites, where someone is taking a legitimate website, looking at it, and they are buying a domain name that's very, very similar, that someone could easily make a mistake. And then they'll spoof the original page. So this on the left is ABC News, the legitimate ABC News website. These slides are a couple years old because these sites come and go, and I couldn't find a current one, so I got an old one. And so we have an article from Rex Tillerson's debut on the world stage. We have Trump asking a black reporter to schedule a meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus. So those were news events that happened on the day that this, or the day before this screenshot was taken. The second screenshot on the left was taken the same day, the same hour. It also claims to be ABC News. But if you look, the articles are completely different. We have breaking news about a Capitol Hill shooter identified as a right-wing extremist. And I'm like, that was a few months ago, but I don't really remember this. And then the article below that is a signing ceremony with former President Barack Obama, who would not be doing a signing ceremony on the same day that Rex Tillerson, Trump's Secretary of State, is going out on the world stage. And not only that, the article name says, Obama signs executive order declaring investigation into the 2016 election results, revote planned. Well, I really don't remember ever that happening. But the day of, there would be some people that would be shocked and surprised and would want to click on that and see what the heck's going on. And it would probably take them quite a while to figure out it was fake news. And when we were looking at this originally and going, what? How we finally found which was which is up in the top here in the address bar for the website. There's something that's called the Uniform Resource Locator, or the URL. The first one, the real one, says abcnews.com. The second one says abcnews.com.co. They've added a CO at the end of the domain name, made it a separate domain, and then they just copied it. So Spoofing a domain name is one that, as I mentioned, it's very, very prevalent in the financial industry. People are less concerned, who do this, are less concerned about fooling you into thinking there's going to be a revote of the 2016 election, and more concerned about grabbing your bank information, your credit card number, your cell phone number, your social security number, and all your private information. So it's really very helpful to be able to read a URL. But it's also very helpful if I'm trying to evaluate a website and I want to know who it's from. Because some of those URLs are really long and they have lots of letters and numbers and characters. And if I'm trying to look at the whole thing, it's overwhelming. If I know that I just need to look at that first part, I can ignore the end. So when I'm looking at a URL, the first part is what's called the protocol, what programming language they use, HTTP, HTTPS. Then after that, it gives the host name. So this first web address, it says hedbergpubliclibrary.org/local authors. Hedberg Public Library is the host. This is one of our web pages. And then the file is local authors. Anything after the domain name is files and how you get to the files and file formats. Those can be long, you can mostly ignore them. The second one here is wpl.winnipeg.ca. So this is another public library. It's Winnipeg Public Library in Canada. American URLs American websites were the first ones to go up on the web because the United States started the internet through the Defense Department. And a lot of other countries, when they came on, they started getting two-letter country codes or country identifiers. So since this second website's from Canada, it has the .ca, which says that this website was registered in Canada, and I can tell right away what country it's from, that it's not American. And so if I see a two-letter code there, I can either guess the country or I can look it up. You can find these pretty easily on the internet. But .uk would be the United Kingdom. .ru would be Russia, .au would be Australia. So let's take a quick look at some fake URLs and very common types of fakes that we see in the URLs. We just looked at the abcnews.com where they added a .co. And with the news sites, they'll do that with like Washington Post or the New York Post or pretty much any news site periodically. The second one is an old one from the early days of the internet where there was a whitehouse.gov. .govs, we know, are government agencies. You cannot get a .gov domain name unless you are a U.S. government agency. And everyone had this beautiful, we developed this beautiful, nice website for the White House. Well, someone else bought the domain name whitehouse.com. And most people at that time, they just kind of assumed everything was a .com, so they'd go to whitehouse.com instead of whitehouse.gov. And it was a porn site. So that caused quite a furor for quite a while. And then their domain name expired, and right now nobody's using it. But the next couple ones are more commonly used today, are ones that give examples of ones that are more commonly used today, where they will switch the letters around. HBSC becomes HSBC. Or yahoo.com, they throw in an extra O, and you're going someplace else. The RN right next to each other in the font that's used for websites looks like an M, so those get flip-flopped an awful lot. The BMO Harris one, okay, that one I stumbled across through a Google search. I was looking for my bank, typed in BMO Harris, and it came up, the first link said login. And I clicked on it, and it went straight to the login screen. And I thought, that's odd. Usually, it goes to the main page, and then you have to click log on. Or in the Google search, it'll have the main page link and then the logon underneath it. So I was looking around and clicking, and everything clicked to someplace on the BMO Harris website. It just still didn't feel right. And so I dug around in my paperwork, and I found that the real address was BMO Harris. And the one that I had found on Google was harris-bank.com. It was a fake. It still came up on Google. So someone had paid for it. They managed to get themselves up in the search rankings. And if I hadn't been watching those URLs, I might have fallen for it. And then I wouldn't have been typing in my bank information and giving it to BMO. I'd be giving it to some stranger, who knows where, for who knows what purpose. So this last one is one that we encounter here at the public library, and we run into this, and it drives me nuts every time. It's very frustrating. We have a lot of people who come in who don't use the internet very much. They don't hardly use their email at all, and they just asked someone to send them a very important email, and now they need to get into their email account, and they are not quite sure what their email address is, and they really don't remember their password. They don't have another email account to send a code to. The phone number in the account is not the phone number they have right now. So basically, they're locked out, and they're frantic. So they're hunting around. They hunt through all the help pages on Yahoo, and then they go into Google and type in phone number Yahoo. They're looking for someone to call and say, help me. Well, they find this website, customersupportnumber.com/Yahoo support. It's really small, and it's really kind of long. And they're sitting there, they see Yahoo support, and they think it's the right page. It's not. It's this company, customersupportnumber.com. And the phone is answered by some nice person with an Indian accent who talks them into downloading a program onto their computer, and that program will rummage around and help them find their email address, and then it'll ask for their credit card. And in the end, they never get into their Yahoo account, because this company really, they're not Yahoo. They have no access to it. So these are the kinds of things that people will play around with URLs and try and trick you, and it's fake news. Then there's the pictures. So I don't know how well you can see this right here. We've got a lot of people gathered around this humongous squid that washed up on the beach. I mean, it's huge. It's the size of a whale. And so when I'm looking at this and I'm looking at pictures, there's some things you can do to spot a fake picture. And the first thing I look at is light and shadows. So I don't know if you can tell, but all the people here gathered around this giant squid have shadows. And the shadows are all pointing in the same direction, and that tells me where the sun is. The sun's over here someplace. And that sun should be shining on the squid and casting shadows on the squid, casting shadows behind the tentacles, but probably lighting up underneath that front end. And none of the shadows on the squid are in the right place. So that's clue number one. Clue number two is the squid itself has all kinds of shiny light, where the light is shining down and reflecting off of it. And that light is all along the top. So the light is coming from a completely different direction than the light shining on the people casting the shadows. So that picture is definitely fake news. And there's a lot of picture fakes. And when I'm looking at photos, we could almost do a whole program checking how to check photos and how to troubleshoot photos. But some real quick things to keep in mind are slowing down and taking a second look. When we're looking at pictures, our brain processes them very quickly, and almost too quickly for that critical thinking to kick in. And we believe it before we've even processed it. So shadow and light I mentioned. Lighting quality and contrast and resolution and texture. Each picture, each camera will have a different character to its pictures. The size of the pixels, the number of pixels that are in a square centimeter, and you really can't count them, but in especially a bad photoshopped, a bad fake, you can tell the difference. Let's see if I can back up here. I don't know if I can, sorry. But you can tell the difference. That squid was a little fuzzier. It was had lower resolution than the people who were standing. The other thing you can do is look at perspective and scale. So, and then the last thing that you can do, the last couple of things, is get really fancy, and you can do reverse image searches. And as I mentioned, I didn't want to do a full demo on that because I've done that and it takes a long time. But a friend of mine did a handout on reverse image searches, doing it in 3 different browsers, where you're basically dragging the image, putting it in your search, and then the search will see all the places where that picture shows up. And sometimes you can get back to an original picture, which takes that picture in its original context. Other times, like this one's from, the squid pictures from someplace called the Museum of Hoaxes, and they have a gallery of hoaxes of all kinds of fake pictures. So I do have that handout after we're done. If you were interested, you can come pick that up. She did a good job with it. So we've looked at, all the things the type of fake news, from photos, from website spoofs, from we want it to be true, from satire. Then there's the fake news that's just somebody blew it, completely blew it. So I don't know if any of you remember this photo. It's from this article, it's from back in 2011. And in 2011 in Wisconsin, there was this big brouhaha with the governor and the unions, and everyone was all up in arms. And on this particular day, President Obama came into the state, and he was going to do a speech for a labor union somewhere in the Milwaukee area. And there were all kinds of reporters from major national news organizations that didn't know Wisconsin very well, that were running around and doing reporting and not checking their facts real well. So this particular reporter from Politico wrote, "It's very clear what side President Obama is on here in Wisconsin. Behind the stage where he will speak today are 2 flags, an American one, and right alongside it, a flag for the local union, Wisconsin 1848. Yes, they'd actually mistaken with the Wisconsin state flag with our incorporation date of 1848 for a union flag, local number 1848. That article did not stay up on the Politico website very long. That reporter's editor, who is from Oshkosh, was mortally embarrassed. And it came down, and you can only find it in articles where they're talking about remember when. But reporters do make mistakes. And so that's where some of the fake news can come from. They can come from errors. This also came from a major website. I don't know if you've heard this. Redheads are going to be extinct in 100 years, So you're a dying breed back there. And so this article was originally in the Daily Mail of London, and it was reprinted in multiple papers. And it talks about how, the theory is that redheads, the red-haired gene and the fair-skinned gene came from ancient peoples moving up into northern climes where there wasn't as much light, and they needed to get more vitamin D through their skin, so their genetics changed so they could absorb more vitamin D. And now that we have climate change, Well, those cooler climes won't be so cool anymore, and they don't need that adaptation. So that's this whole theory, and I'm looking at it going, well, I can't do the About Us because I know the Daily Mail is a legitimate newspaper. It's maybe 1 or 2 steps up above the National Enquirer, but it is a legitimate newspaper. And I don't know anything about the author. Let me just go ahead and search this. Just put in a search engine, redheads going extinct, and I found tons of articles coming up from geneticists saying, this is nuts. This is not how genetics works. It wouldn't happen that fast. Besides, it's a recessive gene. It'll stay in the population forever, even if it becomes obsolete. And then someone did a little more digging and popped up and said, you know where this came from? This guy who issued a press release for his company. His company is a genetic testing service in Scotland. And they had just developed a test to test for the gene for red hair. And they wanted to advertise to people that they had this test for the gene for red hair and kind of grab their attention so they'd be interested in seeing if they have this gene for red hair. And so they sent out a press release. And some editor at the Daily Mail, which is always looking for content, and always kind of looking for sensational type content because that's their audience and they want to keep that audience coming. So those eyeballs will keep coming, so that ad revenue will keep coming, so that they can get up tomorrow and do this all over again. Well, they took that press release at face value and just slapped it in the newspaper. So that's another way that fake news can make its way into the news stream. And it's very common with health claims. You know, chocolate is good for you, and red wine is good for you. You start looking a little bit in the article, and it was a study, but you don't know where the study is. If you actually find it, it might have been 12 people. Not scientifically valid, but it makes a cool headline that people will click on. So those were all examples of purely fake news. Not true, not a bit. There's also a lot of news out there that really is true, but the person writing it, the person posting it and giving it to you has an agenda. And the most obvious of those are the sponsored, the ads. So we have 15 discount seniors get only if they know, sponsored by Improved Budget. We have CDs, our money machines right now, lock-in rates, sponsored, you can hardly see it, it's very faint, but it's sponsored by Bankrate.com. You have sponsored by Kelley Blue Book, which facilitates the sale of cars. They have an article about first picks, new cars, SUVs, and trucks coming in 2019. So all this information, the new cars and trucks, if you are in the market for a new car and truck, this is news. This is noteworthy information. It's recent and it's important. It's also being given to you by someone who wants to sell their cars and their services. So as long as you know where it's coming from, you can take that information and just go with it. Another way that they slip in ads, the Overture Center for the Arts. I have a lot of friends on my Facebook feed who go to the Overture Center, so therefore, because they're friends with me, I get this ad for Overture Center. It says sponsored. It just keeps coming up over and over. So it'll come up on your news feeds. It also comes up when you do a search. So the HomeDepot.com, where it says ad in front of it, I just did a Google search. And Home Depot is so concerned about coming up at the top of the search engine, the top of the search results, that they pay money to Google to make sure that they show up first. They do give an ad disclaimer, so saying that they paid to be there, but when you do a Google search, usually your first 2 or 3 or 4 results are paid listings. And then you get your real search results. So ads, if you know that they are ads, that's fine. So it is information, whether or not you want it, it is information. It's when you don't know they're ads that you can get into trouble. So there's web pages out there saying, shocking, this great new story, and they have this makeup that makes them look like some news organization, and then you read through and you get all the way to the end, and they're asking for money. So it was an ad. So other places where ads are in the banners on the top, in the call-outs and the margins. You're reading an article, it shows up in the middle. In the footers. And that really sneaks up on you when you're printing. So I have this 2-page article, I click print, 10 pages come out. I have my 2 pages of what I really wanted, and I have 8 pages of ads, and more ads, and a bunch of wasted paper. But they got my eyeballs, they got my clicks, and someone got their money. Ads will show up hidden in the background. Sometimes if you click on the white space and all of a sudden you get a pop-up come up, that's because there's a hidden ad in that white space. And just by clicking on it, you got this extra ad that you didn't plan on. They show up in your email, they show up before songs and videos on YouTube, and they show up in your search results. So ads are everywhere. And as long as you know that they're ads, and you know that someone paid for this and that they have an agenda, that's fine. So being aware that they are ads helps you out and helps steer you from following someone else's agenda unless you really want to. Another example of ways that people grab your attention and try and suck you into their agenda, not your own, is sensationalism. And that's the use of exciting and shocking stories or language, sometimes maybe at the expense of accuracy, but they're trying to provoke public interest and excitement. So this is an article from a few days ago from the New York Post. So it's a real story. It is a sad story. A teenager was at a party. Her cell phone was in the room in another room. The room was locked. She wanted to get to it, and she looked out and she thought, oh, I'll climb on the fire escape and get from the fire escape to the next room. She didn't make it. She fell 6 floors. And so it is a sad story. It's particularly hard on family and friends. But in terms of me in Wisconsin, I go, this is sad. I'm not sure why it is the main pay article on the New York Post for that day. Well, the New York Post has this tradition of taking a sensational story and following it, and following it, and following it. One of their most famous ones, or maybe I'm dating myself, is Amy Fisher. I don't know if you ever remember that Amy Fisher. That was the New York Post taking one story and they sensed some sensationalism and just ran with it. So they have had several stories about this teen who fell. One of them, they interviewed the neighbors about saying, that fire escape is really, really dangerous. I'm not surprised someone fell. I would be terrified even if the building was burning down going on it. They have an article saying they've tried to contact the girl's parents and haven't been able to. And it just has this feel that they're going to let it run for several days because it's a sensational story. It grabs people's attention. It grabs their eyeballs. It keeps them coming back, and it keeps those clicks coming and the ad revenue coming. So another way that people do suck us into their agenda is editorializing. Okay, this is an opinion piece where they tell you it's an opinion piece. From the Washington Times, let's plot the Trump coup together. And if you open it up, because it's a pretty sensational headline, you go, what? And you open it up, And what it is, it's the editor going on about how awful it was that the New York Times did publish the anonymous editorial from the person in the Trump White House next week. So they are giving their opinion. It is very clearly an opinion. They're telling you exactly what they think, and they tell you it's an opinion. A lot of times, opinion will show up where they're not telling you. They're not saying, this is the editorial page, this is an opinion. They just let the opinion run. And then there's speculation. So I don't know if you knew this, but the moon landing, I know they want to celebrate it, you know, the big anniversary next year, but it's a hoax. It never happened because the CIA wanted to do this big publicity thing about something. They set it all up. Those rockets were movie props, and they bribed all the witnesses. They scared all the witnesses so that nobody will talk. They made these fake moon rocks. They're really something else. And the theories go on and on and on. So there's a lot of conjecture. There's absolutely no evidence. There's a lot of evidence to show the other side. But speculation is another mainstay of the news with an agenda. It really kind of hooks people's attention. It makes them say, what if? It makes them question reality. It makes them question what they know. And as soon as they start questioning what they already know, they start to fall for all kinds of things. And one of the biggest indicators that someone is going to fall for fake news is they've fallen for fake news previously. If they believe in one conspiracy theory, they're more likely to believe in multiple conspiracy theories. So the first section, I showed you a lot of fake news pages, and 2 years ago when I was looking at fake news, that was the kind of fake news I was finding. I was finding things like The Onion. I was finding things like the Weekly World News, which used to be a tabloid. That was a step below the Inquirer. Most everything was fake in it. That's the one that had the Bat Boys and the aliens and all that. I was finding all kinds of websites like that, and the Vin Diesel or the whoever in your local town. Those sites are much fewer. I was looking for new examples, and I was having trouble finding them. What there is a lot of is retellings. And this is where they take a news story, retell it, and they add in speculation, opinion, and editorializing, and sensationalism. So here's an example from this last week. Original article from the Washington Post. U.S. is denying passports to Americans along the border, throwing their citizenship into question. If you open up the article and read it, apparently what happened is some years ago, there was a midwife along the Texas-Mexico border who delivered probably 600 babies. And of those 600 babies, 2 of them, she said, yeah, I put the birth out on the wrong country. They were born in Mexico, and they got a U.S. birth certificate. 2 out of 600. And there's 1 or 2 other medical practitioners where there's some questions. So this has been an investigation that's been going on a long time, trying to figure out who these people are, what do we want to do with them. They're adults now, they're not babies. They had, no say in this. And this, the investigation was going on under the Obama administration, and it may actually have started under George W. Bush. So that's the Washington Post story. New York Magazine took that original story and then did a little cut and paste. So they took some first off, they did a really sensational headline. Trump administration, not US, it's really focusing on Trump, so some people, this is a good flag to grab you, and some people that's not a not good flag, where I need to look at this article. It says they're revoking passports and deporting citizens. There's nothing about deporting citizens in the original article. And then who happen to be Hispanic. Well, yes, these citizens may be Hispanic. They were born on the border. They may have been born in Mexico, maybe not. But the way that headline is phrased, it really sounds like it's something else. They've taken a story and sensationalized it. They grabbed loaded language and kind of exaggerated it a bit. And then the article itself, they take paragraphs from the Washington Post article and intersperse it with paragraphs of their own. And the paragraphs of their own has lots of sensationalism and lots of editorializing and maybe even a little speculation. And this is what I'm seeing more of right now. This is what I'm seeing is the current face, predominant face of fake news. Because it grabs people in because there's some truth to it. And then that makes it harder to say it's completely fake. So this is another example. This was a little older. And this one is the article on the left here is from a website called InfoWars. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one. This was one of the tamer articles I found when I was looking on InfoWars to find an example. It says, NYC mayor goes full commie, calls to end of private property, Bill de Blasio channels Karl Marx in a recent interview. So very sensational, attention-grabbing headlines. And then the picture, it's got the New York mayor right in front of the sickle and hammer flag. Now, since I've been practicing identifying my pictures, I did notice that the shadows on his face are in the opposite direction of the shadows on the flag. And the flag is, you can't really tell it blown up on the screen here, but on a computer screen you can see it has a very different resolution. It was blown up from something really small. So the picture's fake. But they have this article and they have this quote from Bill de Blasio that says, what's been hardest is the way our legal system is structured to favor private property, and he goes on talking about how this favoritism towards private property makes it hard to do zoning with good neighborhoods with good zoning and provide housing for people, and the quote goes on and on. He's a politician and he talks a lot. And I'm sitting there going, what the heck is going on here? But it does look like a legitimate quote, but the source is not reliable and the picture that goes with it is really a fake, but it looks like a legitimate quote. So I just copied that quote, plugged it into Google, and I came up with the original article from New York Magazine. And it's the same New York Magazine that in our last example did the whack job on the Washington Post article. This time, it was their article that got the whack job. And so when I found this original quote in this article, it gave the reporter's question. And the reporter's question is, you made a lot of campaign promises. You wanted to take on income inequality and improving incomes. You wanted to improve education and you wanted to improve housing. Which has been the hardest? Which is why the answer started, what's been the hardest is, and then he goes on, mentions legal system to structure to favor private property, and he goes on, and basically what's hardest is housing. Because of the way our legal system's set up. It makes it a challenge. So once you read the original quote, the whole thing makes a whole lot more sense. But in the InfoWars article, they do throw in not just the quote, but they do a lot of editorializing, they do a lot of speculation, and it goes on and on and on, and could almost do a whole program just on that one article alone. So pictures also can be repurposed. So this picture was going around a couple years ago, and it was, the story is that it's a Syrian orphan sleeping on the beach between the graves of his parents. Grabs your heart. Until you read the photographer saying, "No! That's my nephew. His parents are fine. This was an art project that I did that I was trying to show the horrors of war." Those are fake graves. There's nobody buried there. But that picture was shown in a lot of articles about the Syrian refugee crisis and the Syrian war, which is a really tough subject. And a picture like this does help convey the an emotional punch so people can really comprehend a big subject. But that's not where it was taken or why. And then this one, have you all seen this picture? The little girl in pink crying. This one is another one. It's appeared in a lot of articles about family separation at the border. It's another one, if you dig in, the original story behind it isn't quite the same. So I first saw it in upteen million Facebook posts about how the whole family separation thing is horrible. The actual article, do you know where this little girl's mother is? She's the person in the middle. So, yes, they're at the border. Yes, the guy in the khaki pants is border patrol. And he's talking with the little girl's mother. And so it is a picture about the crisis at the border and the changes in policy and the impact that it had in families. And just looking at that little girl and thinking what she's been through, and here's this scary dude talking to her mom, and it's time for me to have a meltdown. And kids that age have had meltdowns for a lot less. So it's a powerful picture. It has a good punch. It has been used in places that give the implication that it really is something that it's not. So all of these are people trying to guide you through to their agenda. And you might agree with their agenda. And there's nothing wrong with agreeing with their agenda and following their agenda, as long as you know that it's your choice and you're not getting sucked in completely unaware. So some tips for sidestepping agendas: be skeptical. Ask if your emotional response is taking the place of a valid or compelling argument. Ask for sources and evidence. Ask questions. But don't just ask questions, search for the answers. Just asking questions is defeatist. Search for the answers. Clarify facts from opinions. Separate opinions from rumors. And watch out for common cognitive traps, the kinds of things where they put an eye-catching photo that grabs your emotion. That's just a brain trick. And people know a lot of brain tricks, and they will play them on you. And it's helpful to be able to know how to deal with all this on some of these articles that they're just trying to shape your agenda just a little bit to match theirs. So you're prepared when fake news gets really nasty, because it does. So there's propaganda. And propaganda is biased information that is designed specifically to shape public opinion and behavior. This is a poster from 100 years ago from World War I. It's an enlistment poster. Destroy this mad brute. It's got this kind of animalistic beast with the German soldier's helmet on it. So it's a very anti-German, it's a very emotional, and it's trying to get people to follow the agenda. It's primarily used to influence audiences and further agendas. And propaganda is not all in the past. Does anyone know, this is a news website called RT. Does anyone know what RT stands for? No? It's Russia Today. So it used to be called Russia Today. They've rebranded it to RT. It is funded by the Russian government. It is their English language propaganda arm. And when you read the articles, they are really not objective. They are really trying to sell you something, sell you an idea, to influence audience, to promote an agenda. They use loaded language, and they definitely present facts selectively. So there's propaganda out there, and there's trolls. So trolls live anywhere where there's free and open comments. So they can live underneath the articles and those comment fields. They can live on Twitter. They can live on Facebook, in the comment section of the Gazette and the Sound Off. And occasionally, they do have a comment where there's a well thought out response to an article, giving additional information or giving a correction, giving additional sources, but those are pretty rare. Most often the trolls are, it's more like barroom chatter. You're sitting in the bar and people are half drunk. They're talking smack. They do insult each other. They boast. They ramble on. It's the drunk going on and on in the corner. There's lots of gossip. There's rumors. There's people picking fights. And there's flirting in the bar. And all of this, it's unverifiable. We can't find sources for it usually. And the flirting, actually, that's really sneaky. So if someone is looking at a post on Facebook or in Twitter, and they want, you posted something and I like it. So I'm going to tell you I like it. So what do you think you're going to do? You're going to go, someone likes my post. I should find another post like that. And then, what happens if a lot of people like your post? Lots and lots and lots of people like your post. Then you're going to post lots and lots more. So we've been hearing a lot about social bots lately, and those are computer programs that go out and pretend they're humans. They impersonate humans. And one of the things that they do is they like articles and share articles. And what they're trying to do is promote their own agenda. So you got likes on your post from 3 real people, but 1,000 bots. Are you really going to know it's only 3 people? You're going to feel like top of the world. And then whoever programmed those bots, as you post more and more stuff, they find you more and more useful. The phrase is useful idiots in spy language. And all of that falls into the category of social engineering. So social engineering, this right here is the most famous example, one of the most famous examples in history of social engineering, the Trojan horse. So it's psychological manipulation to create a behavior change. In the Trojan War, the gates of Troy were locked, and they were not letting those Greeks in no matter what. You know, they begged, they pleaded, they pounded on the gates. So they set up this ruse where they pretended to leave, and they gave them this horse as a go-away gift. And the Trojans said, let's bring the gate into the city. They manipulated with psychology the Trojans' behavior, and the Trojans opened the gates for the Greeks. Wasn't in the Trojans' best interests at all, but they did it. And there's a lot of social engineering on the internet. You know, some of the tamer stuff are those articles with sensationalism and editorialism and a little bit of speculation. The not so tame stuff are the people who are trying to steal your credit card numbers by setting up fake web pages. But there's a lot of it. So how do you deal with it? If you've spotted some things, you know you've spotted the obvious stuff. You might have been able to spot some of the manipulation, the editorializing, but there's some articles that you're still just not sure. Well, you can fact check them. And there are several websites out there that let you fact check articles. Snopes is one that's been around for a long time, almost 25 years now. It was founded by a guy who liked urban legends, and he just wanted to do research to see if they were true and post that information and share it out on the internet back in the mid-1990s. The website certainly has grown. He does a lot. He and his employees do a lot of fact checking, not only of urban legends, but also, you know, those fake pictures, those fake stories. So they're really good at picking up things. You know, once a video gets going, sometimes it gets separated from its original source, and you don't know that the video was The Onion. You don't know that this video that is of this German announcer just laughing, news announcer laughing hysterically over something that an American official said was from a cold open of the Colbert Report. And so Snopes is a chance for you to connect that information back together. It's just Snopes.com. You go to that website, you type in whatever story it is you're looking for, and you see if they've researched it. Another one is PolitiFact. And this one was founded by the Tampa Bay Times. It runs in a lot of newspapers. It has since spun off from Tampa Bay Times, and it's now a nonprofit. And they are checking, and they're just trying to be a fact-check national news organization. And they get reprinted in a lot of local papers. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel Online is a partner with them. And so you will see their little truthometer in the articles, you know, whether the article they determine is true, mostly true, half true, all the way down to liar, liar, pants on fire. And so that's politifact.com. Another one is factcheck.org. Factcheck.org also focuses on politics. They are part of the Annenberg Public Policy Center, which is a nonprofit organization part of the University of Pennsylvania. And their mission is to study issues that affect public policy issues at the local, state, and federal levels. So that's another thing that you can take a look at and see if your story has been reported there. So those are the big three. There's a couple smaller ones to know about. Hoaxslayer.net. Yes, they do have a dash. I think I said before, having a dash in the domain name is often a sign of a fake. In this case, it's not. Hoax-slayer.net is a website that is trying to make the internet safer and more pleasant and productive. Their focus is debunking internet, particularly email hoaxes. Those chain letters that go around the email, and combating spam and educating users about email and internet security issues. Trutherfiction.com is really focused on urban legends. So those are ones that have been around, all been around for a while. This last one is new, just this past year. Hamilton 68. And Hamilton, it's named after the Federalist paper number 68, written by Alexander Hamilton, which is about protecting America's electoral process from foreign meddling. It's founded by a couple of guys. One of them is a former FBI agent called Clint Watts, and he is really into researching Russian meddling on the internet. And so they have set up this dashboard where they're tracking mostly Twitter. So their focus is on Russian-linked influence on Twitter. The content isn't necessarily created by Russia, government operatives, but it's something that they might amplify. And so this is today, September 11th. The top hashtag is Syria. I can't really read these here. I can't remember what the second one was. The third one was MAGA, Make America Great Again. Never Forget is one of those. It's September 11th. So there's a lot of posts about September 11th, and some of them are coming from Russian bots. And they also do trending hashtags and top domain names, you know, where, and so if you're wondering if the bot, if you're seeing bot traffic, you can take a peek here and see what the bots are doing today. This is maybe less important for average everyday people, but it's really important for the reporters, because if the bots and the people who are behind the bots can influence a reporter and make that reporter think that a particular article is more important and of more interest than it really is, then that reporter is going to start reporting on that issue. And therefore, they're shaping the news by influencing the reporters. So this has been a tool that a lot of reporters have been checking into. So we've been fact-checking, we've been spotting fake photos and fake articles, and we've been stepping clear of other people's agendas, but we're still in our bubbles. I still want to go, you know, I'm tired at the end of the day. I don't want to read articles from people who disagree with me. I want to find something that I like. And my computer is still feeding me articles similar to what I've picked on before. So I need a way to avoid my intellectual isolation. I need to bust out of my bubbles. And the first thing I have to keep in mind is that bias by itself is just someone's worldview. There's nothing wrong with bias. It just is and is. Now, people who are biased often will use some of the other techniques of sensationalism and opinions to try and shape you to believe their view. You can be persuaded, you cannot be persuaded. You can't change their opinion because that's their worldview. And this is a picture, or a silhouette of a picture, of the story of the 5 blind men and the elephant. So there were 5 blind men. They didn't know what an elephant was. They wanted to know what an elephant was. So they found an elephant, and they were all touching the elephant. And one of them was touching the tusk and went, an elephant is just like a spear. Another one was touching the trunk and went, oh, the elephant is like a hose, a big fire hose. Someone else was touching the tail and saying the elephant is like a rope. The leg, the guy who's touching the leg, the elephant is a tree trunk. The guy you can't see in the silhouette is touching the side of the elephant, and he's going, an elephant's a wall. Each of them was right in what they were touching. They could see through their fingers part of the elephant. They could not see the whole thing. And for a lot of the big issues that we're dealing with in the news right now, and have been for many years, those cultural issues, whether it's guns or marriage or who is our president and who is not, we're all only seeing parts of the big picture. So if I stick in my little bubble and I'm the person touching the tail, I'm not going to see the whole elephant. The only way I can see the whole elephant is to look at other people's worldviews. I might not like them, but I do want to see them. And sometimes I might change my mind. And one way I can do that is I can read laterally. So if I read on one end of the spectrum, I make sure to read some articles from the other end of the spectrum. This screenshot is from a website called All Sides, which makes it easy for you to find this stuff. Their mission is to reflect the news as it's covered by a breadth of perspectives. And their website is just allsides.com. It's pretty simple. And so what we have is one news story that they're focusing on. Trump asked Jeff Sessions to investigate anonymous NYT op-ed author. And then they give 3 sample articles. One from right sources from the right end of the spectrum, one from sources on the left end of the spectrum, and one from the middle. So you can look and compare and see what kind of language they're using and what kind of points they raise. And when I do that, I can broaden my perspective and I can stretch my bubbles a little bit so they aren't quite so tight. The other thing about All Sides is they have a media's bias ranking. And so if I don't know a particular source, I can hop on here and see how they're ranked. Are they left? Are they right? Where are they in between? Leaning left, leaning right, dead center. And they do use research to try and determine this. There are some other ones out there that really just kind of use observation and smaller samples. They use blind surveys, third-party data, and they also do crowdsourcing. So on this page they have community feedback, where you can say if you agree with their ranking or not, and you can see the results of how many people agreed, how many disagreed, and you can see how accurate the crowd thinks the rankings are. This is another chart. It might not be as carefully researched in terms of sources, but it's really visual, and it gives some additional information. So it does have the left-right spread, but it also has top-down. So at the top, it's giving original fact reporting. The people who go out and do the interviews, the people who look through the original records and who put it all together. Then it gives fact reporting where people are looking at facts, but maybe they're borrowing someone else's work. Then down here, this line, actually the top 2 sections, you notice people are sort of, yes, there's a left-right swing, but they're sort of clumped towards the middle because they're focusing on the facts. Whereas the next line down is where you start to see things spread out left-right. And that's where you get the complex analysis, where people are doing a detailed examination of the elements and the structure of a story, why things are happening the way they are, and more of the background information. And at that point, that's where bias really matters. And so you do have more swings left to right there. You moving down, you start to get into opinion. Here you're getting into what they call fair opinion, where they're giving you the facts and then they're trying to persuade you. As opposed to moving further down, selective or incomplete story, unfair persuasion, where they're trying to manipulate you. Down at the bottom, you start to get propaganda, contains misleading information, and completely inaccurate and fabricated information way down at the bottom. So as you see, as we get down further down, we have more and more diversity between the really left wing and the really right wing. That's when things get really ugly. And then you see a couple little things in the middle. They're neutral. They're still made up. The National Enquirer, our old friend from the grocery store. So the idea of this chart is not just looking left to right, but also balancing your news consumption top to bottom. So one column you have the facts, the who, what, when, where. You have people who are looking at primary source material, who actually are doing the research. The other column, you have what they call the news-like information. You have the analysis, the editorials, those opinion pieces, the satire, the really fun stuff, and those panel discussions where talking heads sit and argue with each other. And the idea is you want to make sure that in your news diet, you have some real news. That it's not all this news-like stuff, because there's so much opinion over there that really will twist you around and shape your opinion and really chase you off onto someone else's agenda and not your own. Some other things to do, I try and do as I am trying to expand my own intellectual bubbles, is I try and question my own bias. These are getting harder and harder, I know. So I keep telling myself I have to ask for sources and evidence. I ask myself, am I holding on to my beliefs, even though there is contrary information out there that argues against it? And am I substituting opinion for fact? And I also need to diversify my friends. So I have all these friends on Facebook. A lot of them think like me. A lot of them are going to send me articles that I will like and that I will agree with. And I do try and keep some people in there, some people I've worked with, some people from various community groups, some people from my family who I don't agree with. And so every once in a while, someone will send an article my way and I go, oh, it's them again. But at the same time, it's reminding me that not everybody thinks like me.